what was it like being on the other side of just like the line culture?
Yeah, it was goofy. Hired hands would announce on Instagram on Tuesday night or Tuesday at 5:00 what the beer was being released at Wednesday at 5, and I'd show up at Wednesday at 7:00 in the morning, and there were lines of chairs of people waiting, and I had not put the beer into the can yet. It used to drive me nuts. I'd be like, guys, I haven't even put it in the can yet. I'm like sitting there, and I don't know if you've worked on a Wild Goose before, but this is one of the earlier Wild Goose canning lines, so like it wasn't exactly dialed in.
People are just waiting for you, and it's like,
I'm motherfucking everything. I'm throwing cans across the room, like, God damn it, the steamer's not working, like nothing's working, and I'm like, and there's 100 people down the street watching me throw cans across the fucking room.
Welcome back to the Brew That Podcast. I'm your host, Richie Tevlin, joined as always by Evan Blum.
I'm back.
And tonight we have on someone that we've mentioned probably every single episode.
No way.
If not you, New Trail, just because you guys are doing so much. But Mike LaRosa of New Trail.
I'm happy to be here.
But before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, Saucony Co. So Saucony Co is a malt supplier in the area. They're new. I guess they've been supplying bread malt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to grains for bread.
It seems like it's a lot of flour, and like they'll do flaked oats and stuff like that too.
Yeah, but they've been around for over 100 years, family-owned company, but really excited to have them on. But
they just have in Allentown, so super close by. Which is cool.
Just starting to dip their toe into brewing supplies. So if you need to contact them, hit up Brad or follow our links in our podcast notes to get for all your brewing needs.
Yeah, they're good people. We buy from them too.
Yep, free shipping. But you
$5
guys
shipping.
$5 shipping.
$5 shipping.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, might as well be free.
Yeah, but with that said, let's kind of get started. So welcome. We've been hoping to have you on for a while. I mean, like I said, we've mentioned you almost every episode, just because I think you guys are the fastest growing brewery I know in the state. Maybe.
Yeah, in 2021, the Brewers Association named us the fastest growing brewery in America. So
not bad.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride. I mean, we're about to celebrate our 7th anniversary. You call it our 7th orbit.
Okay.
Orbit around the sun. Yeah, I mean, when we started New Trail, it was very modest. Like we were talking about maybe doing 5,000 barrels in 5 years, and year 1 was like 3,000 barrels. Year 2 was 6. Year 3 was 10 or 12. Fast forward to 7 years from now, I think in 2025 through the heat exchanger, we're going to push 70,000 barrels. Yeah,
it's nuts. In an era where a lot of people are shrinking and going out of business, like you guys kind of like cut through everything and forged your own trail.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Probably everyone says that to you.
No, it's fine. It's like I'll just back my pickup truck and you put all the beer in the back of my pickup truck.
Yeah. Okay, so we will get to New Trail, but before that, we want to talk to you. Who is Mike LaRosa? I know that you have a crazy history as far as like what breweries you've been involved with, what you've seen over the years. So we want to start from the beginning, I guess, even from home brewing.
Yeah, I was born May 16th, 1990. No, I started homebrewing with my dad. My dad was a homebrewer before I was born. He was part of that early revolution of homebrewing in the late 80s, early 90s. And craft beer was always a part of my life. Mm-hmm. Like we lived down the street from Victory. I grew up in Downingtown. So my dad would take me to Victory when it was basically the size of this room. We'd play pool. I'd drink root beer. He'd drink Hop Wallop or Hop Devil. It was a fun time. But I got into high school. My parents were pretty open with alcohol. It was a beer at dinner, or if we were having a bonfire, you'd have 2 beers, those sorts of things. So I was really into beer. I liked the flavor. And I said to my dad, I was probably 17-ish, I'd love to homebrew. And he's like, I've been waiting for you to say that. So, because he didn't homebrew from the time basically I was born until then. So we homebrewed a couple batches together. And
does that mean you did all the work and he was just like?
It was extract brewing. So it wasn't like we were all grain or anything. Like my dad probably got rid of all of his equipment at that point. But so my dad was into it, I was into it, and then I went to college, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and I wanted a non-traditional career. I have a degree in environmental studies, business, and sociology, so it was, a non-traditional path.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, homebrewing with my dad was fun. I think that might be a fun career. So I called every brewery within an hour and a half of Reading, Pennsylvania, because I went to Albright. And I got lucky. My dad was friends with a guy that was friends with Brian McConnell at Rock Bottom at the time, who's now at Sterling Pig. And I, begged and pleaded him for an internship. He was like, yeah, kid, I'll take you on for a semester or whatever. And then I bugged him every time I was there until he offered me not a full-time job, but a part-time
You were
job.
driving back and forth between Reading and
King of Prussia, yeah, it was an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, and it would have been, when was this? 2010 or 11 or so?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was young, I was hungry, I really, really wanted it, and Brian gave it to me. Brian taught me a lot.
And he was kind of established at that point, right?
Yeah, Brian would have been about 15 years into his career at
Okay.
that point, I bet. He was an old John Harvard's brewer. He worked for a couple other breweries, I think in D.C. I can't specifically remember where he was prior to John Harvard's, but he'd gone through that early scene, like the 90s into the 2000s scene.
At any point, did your dad ever want to go like professional, specifically after seeing you?
My dad was a hardscaper by trade. So like I grew up laying patios and building, we weren't like mow your lawn, but like everything else that happened in your lawn, we did. So I was familiar with small business ownership. I was excited about that idea. I never really saw myself as working for the man. I always kind of wanted to be the man.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought brewing was an avenue for that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you were brewing there, for 2 years in college?
Yeah, 2 years. I was a incoming junior when I started there.
Okay.
So I worked there my junior and senior year. By the time that I graduated college, I was happy with Rock Bottom. It was, there was maybe 3,000 breweries in the country at the time, 3,000 to 4,000. And I must have emailed, every brewery on the face of the planet. Like I wanted the job. Like I just wanted to be the man. And eventually I moved on from Rock Bottom because there wasn't any opportunities within Rock Bottom to be promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for Saucony Creek. I was their first brewer to produce beer there. They had originally hired Joe Percoco, if you know Joe Percoco. Now he worked for what's the one out of Allentown area? It's escaping my brain right now.
I don't know, Allentown.
Yeah, it was a brand that was doing a little bit of distribution, and either way, he ended up having Soul in Philadelphia, where Human Robot has their spot now in South. Is where he eventually ended up. Either way, so I came into Saucony Creek. I worked with them for about a year, got them through their first year of production, produced Stonefly, and the first Maple Mistress batches were all me. Things like that. And then I moved on from there, like every brewer did in Philadelphia at the time. I worked for Manayunk. I was a brewer at Manayunk for about 6 months or so.
Why, like everyone has gone through Manayunk. Was it just like a tough place to work? Because it was like kind of awkward, so everybody was...
It was just it was a weird business model for the time.
Yeah.
They were into like having Corona like Coronitas in the buckets that they'd give to everybody.
But it was also a brew pub.
But it also served sushi. It was also a nightclub upstairs. It was just like a goofy brewery for the time as craft beer is exploding. I mean, literally from the time that I started talking about my career to this moment, we went from 3,000 breweries to probably 5,000 or 6,000 breweries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I moved over to Kane on the Jersey Shore. In Jersey, yeah. I was probably their third head brewer. I think I was their third or fourth year.
But you got hired on as head brewer there?
Yeah, I was the head brewer at Kane.
I'm hoping you were living in Jersey then.
I was, yeah. I lived in Ocean, New Jersey. It was interesting, It's fine. I like Jersey. I lived on the beach, but never went to the beach because I worked like a dog. Because Kane at the time was exploding too. Because it's just like craft beer is just exploding. So I think when I started there, they were doing about 2,000 barrels a year. By the time I left, we were pushing like 8,000 barrels.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just huge growth.
And that, I mean, Jersey at that time, that's all distribution, right?
Yeah, it was 100. I mean, he had a tap room. The law had just changed, I think, right before I got hired, where they could sell pints, but you still had to do the brewery tour. You had to do the whole 9 yards. Stupid. Yeah. I mean, Pennsylvania beer laws aren't any better.
No, it's just different stupid.
Yeah,
laws.
It's a different type of stupid. So I worked there for about a year, got them through some pretty big growth strides.
In 1 year, you went from 2,000 to 8,000?
It might have been 6,000. It'd be hard. It's been
but still,
over 10 years. It was huge.
It
was a huge growth year.
So like what from outside of the brew house, like what does that mean from a like in-house perspective of actually getting
one barrel is like what 13.5 cases,
but like just
13.2 is our math.
Just like every day is just going to be
about you're talking about like what the growth was like.
Yeah, what does that look like? Like just hiring more people to help production, just running 24/7 sort of thing.
Yeah, like were you guys set up? Did you have the equipment and everything? Were you like installing and growing and doing everything?
It was a 20 barrel system if I remember correctly. At the time there might have been like 4 or 6 40 barrel fermenters, and I think we installed 260s while I was there. I mean, we're going back over a decade at this point, so it's hard for me to really remember the specifics of what happened during my time there. But I remember like Head High, their flagship IPA, was really, really on the rise. A Night to End All Dawns that year, their bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout won gold medal for JBF. Was it silver? I can't remember. It was some big medal. Mm-hmm. It was like the early days of line culture. Like
gotcha.
Like lines out the door for bourbon barrel aged 750 milliliter bottles that were $20 a bottle or whatever. We're like $20 a bottle. Oh my God! How could anybody ever pay $20 a bottle for a bottle of beer? But no, I mean, Kane was really it was really interesting. Because it was kind of like as East Coast IPA was on the rise. Mm-hmm. Head High I wouldn't have described as a West Coast IPA. It was more gold, like burnt gold by color, had bitterness. It was, I can't remember the hops off the top of my head, but it was more on that citrus side versus like that dank, piney side of West Coast IPA. And it was all draft. There was no 16-ounce cans. At this time, The Alchemist had just started releasing at the farmers markets. I don't know if I'm just speaking into the void right now.
No, I like the farm. So you're talking about like The Alchemist is like what made the hazy IPA. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like the Alchemist at the time was putting they had Heady Topper in their 16-ounce cans or whatever, but they were putting in.
You're saying nobody had 16-ounce cans at this point? Like everybody was 12 ounces in draft?
Bottles, long neck bottles primarily. Yeah. It was like Sly Fox was doing cans on the East Coast, but they were one of the very few that were doing it. It was like Oscar Blues, Sly Fox, and The Alchemist. And The Alchemist was putting it into a 16-ounce can, and the 16-ounce can was printed for Heady Topper, but they were doing these farmers market drops with Focal Banger and what's their stouts? That name's driving me nuts that I can't remember it. Either way, they were these like little stickers, like maybe 2 inches in diameter that they were just slapping on the cans.
I remember
they were selling out.
When The Alchemist was still like impossible to get. It was like the white whale of everything. It was like the people I was working with were like talking shit, and they're like, well, they have to put it in the cans because they don't even know how to filter it. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys wish you guys could brew this. Like they were using the cans as an excuse. Like, well, it's actually not a great beer. That's why I have to put in the cans.
Well, I can go on and on and on on why I think cans are a better
I agree.
vessel.
I think cans are better also, but it was just funny, like from the perspective now of like what they were saying about
exactly. But that sort of leans into what I was trying to get to with East Coast IPA and this New England hazy IPA is that East Coast IPA was becoming more and more hazy, and it was focusing less and less on bitterness and more on aromatics. And Heady Topper was one of the first beers to do that. And Kane at the time, as a draft-only product, was leaning more into that like East Coast pre-New England IPA style of IPA. And then,
were you guys making, like, starting to put some haze into it? Or was
No. He was very big into clear beer at the time. Okay. I believe Head High is now a little bit more hazy than it used to be.
Just unfiltered, kind of?
Unfiltered. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as chunky or anything like that. It's been a little bit since I've had that beer, but I have nothing but respect for that beer. It's a great IPA if you ever had the chance to have it. And it's now available in a 16-ounce can format. So I get Kane through this really, really big growth year. They sort of established themselves as an East Coast brewery. And during that time, I had started going to Tired Hands, the cafe, and I was a fan of, A Light That Spills Out of the Hole in Your Head and Mago Tago and all these, these really juicy and hazy IPAs that were happening in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. And one day I walked in and I was on my way to a wedding, and I was just trying to fill my growlers and have a beer and walk out. And, Gene walked by me sitting at the bar, and he'd met me once or twice throughout my career and knew that I was at Kane. And he looked at me and goes, "You got a minute?" And I was like, yeah, of course I have a minute to talk to you.
This episode of the Brewdat podcast is brought to you by Zilka & Co., your trusted regional brewing supply partner. Family owned for over 100 years of business, Zilka delivers world-class products at competitive prices with flat $5 delivery fee. No pallet or liftgate charges thanks to their own fleet of regularly maintained trucks. With locations in Allentown and Hunker and a technical brewer on staff, they provide the expertise and service your brewery deserves. Reach out to Brad Adelson in the show notes and let him know Brewdat sent you.
and he walked me over to the fermenteria, and they, had just broken ground at the fermenteria. He's like, "Well, do you think you could do this? Do you think you could be the guy that runs this operation and helps me build this?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And that's how I ended up at Tired Hands.
Was that your first time kind of being a part of building out something?
No. When I was at Manayunk, they were swapping their equipment out.
Yeah.
Manayunk had a pretty old system at the time. So we were swapping out tanks, and, at that time, that system had been through, I'm being a little bit bombastic here, but, there was, 5 floods that had gone through Manayunk, and all the equipment was really fucked up.
Rings of a Tree with Manayunk Brewing Company.
Yeah. So, I had done sort of a build-out that way in that I had swapped equipment. I'd worked with contractors. Kane was putting in more and more tanks while I was there, but Tired Hands would have been my first, ground up sort of build.
Cool.
The building was existing, obviously. But,
yeah.
And the floors were poured, but everything else was sort of getting placed in while I started working there.
Yeah. So we talked briefly before we came in here. So you became part of that. Really, what Tired Hands was already a great brewery, but they really, how people know them now is they were the people that invented the milkshake IPA.
Sure. Yeah.
So you were there, I guess, on the ground floor of kind of all that stuff happening. Can you talk what was the size of Tired Hands at that point?
The cafe would have been, I believe it's still the same system. I haven't been to the cafe in quite a bit of time, but it was a 7-barrel Peter Austin system, if I remember correctly. So it was an open top, mash ladder ton. Everything was by hand, and then there was 7-barrel tanks, and there were 7-barrel Grundies in the basement, dish bottom Grundies that we were fermenting out of, and that was mostly saison. But the conicals upstairs.
You're fermenting out of Grundies.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
But. Yeah. Times have changed. 7-barrel Grundies. They had
in cold box, temperature
No.
control.
They had these
saison,
they kind of had a rib cage on the inside of them that were that was glycol cooled.
Okay.
So from there they'd be transferred over into the cold box, which had serving tanks. But they were also Grundies, without that rib cage in the bottom of them. So it was within the first 6 months of my time at Tired Hands that we did the first milkshake IPA. Colin over at Meeting House was the literal brewer of milkshake IPA, but
he was the person that said, "Let's throw a ton of lactose in
No. Gene was sort of the visionary at the time behind that recipe, but Colin was the operator.
And you guys were already making hazy IPAs at that point, and it was was your
100%.
That and saisons were kind of your thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. And they were using fruit as a substitute for hops. Okay. So that's where Mago Tago came from. Yeah. Light That Spills Out of the Hole in Your Head, which was the Clementine IPA that was all happening at the same time. So milkshake IPA was sort of just an inevitability after you're already there. And it makes sense. Lactose adds body, it adds sweetness. It's already milky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So milky by appearance.
Yeah.
And they were delicious. I remember distinctly that day crushing apples to get pectin, to suspend better haze. I remember processing the fruit. And it was just a weird day, retrospectively.
Yeah, you like on the day of, like you're probably not thinking about it, but like looking back, like you're.
I mean, milkshake IPA is not even the craziest thing I think I did there. From like just how experimental it was at that time. It was sort of like the renaissance of just throwing whatever we wanted into beer. Like I remember making a knotweed saison. There was a mushroom IPA or saison. Like it was just whatever we could come up with. We were doing. So.
Yeah, that time in craft beer was just like everyone's trying to discover everything.
Yeah, in a post Dogfish area, not that Dogfish wasn't relevant at the time, but Sam had already gotten through a lot of that early stages of teaching people about using other thinking of it as a culinary experience versus thinking of it as beer.
Yeah, let me pull this yeast off like a mummified.
Yeah, exactly.
Jar
So
or something.
It sort of just made sense. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe taking different ingredients that this might taste a little better, like just lactose instead of like some weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and lactose wasn't uncommon in beer at that point. We were making milk stout, milk porter at the time. It was just like in an IPA. Oh my God, are you crazy? Like, who would think?
Yeah.
So what was it like being on the other side of just like the line culture then that came off of some of the beers there?
Yeah, it was goofy. I used to show up, fast forward a year from where I was talking about.
Yeah.
The fermenteria has been open for close to a year at this point. I installed the canning line, and we were starting to can beer, and we or rather, Tired Hands would announce on Instagram on Tuesday night or Tuesday at 5:00 what the beer was being released at Wednesday at 5. And I'd show up at Wednesday at 7:00 in the morning, and there were lines of chairs of people waiting, and I had not put the beer into the can yet. It used to drive me nuts. I'd be like, guys, I haven't even put it in the can yet. I'm like sitting there, and I don't know if you've worked on a Wild Goose before, but this is one of the earlier Wild Goose canning lines, so like it wasn't exactly dialed in.
People are just waiting for you, and it's like,
I'm motherfucking everything. I'm throwing cans across the room, like, God damn it, the steamer's not working. Like nothing's working, and I'm like, and there's 100 people down the street watching me throw cans across the fucking room. So
that's nuts.
Yeah.
So I guess barrelage wise, were you guys growing a lot of like size at that point, where it was like kind of these exclusive batches where it was just more the line culture was driving everything?
Yeah. I mean, distribution was a light part of what we were doing at the time. Obviously, it wasn't cans. It was cans were all over the bar, so to speak. But when we had designed, or when Gene had designed the firm and I'd come in to start doing the build project, I want to say the initial capacity out of there would have been like 3,000 barrels or so. It was a 20-barrel system, and there was like, I want to say 8 fermenters. It was like 8 20s, and I think by the first month of us operating the firm, I was like, oh fuck, put the gas down, like buy 2 40s, like, and it was like, all right, buy 2 more 40s, like, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew. So like by the time that I left, I was with Tired Hands for about 2 years. They were pacing 8,000 to 10,000 barrels a year ish through the heat exchanger, so.
Yeah, that's reaching a point of like regional brewery.
Yeah, and I mean it was the money was insane. It was most of it was over the bar. There was definitely draft going out at the time.
Yeah.
We were sending maybe 1 or 2 Sprinter vans a day out full of 20-ish half kegs, but 5 days a week to 30 accounts or whatever.
Yeah, and they're going through it just as fast as you guys are.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit briefly outside also, like the kind of the tree of like people that you've worked with at Tired Hands. Like we've talked in other episodes, like the Meeting House guys, the Carbon Copy guys who know Al. It's like there's all these people I guess worked underneath of you.
A lot of them, yeah. I was the production manager there. So like I don't know. It was I think I might have said it earlier. It was the Renaissance. Like, we had a really talented, focused group of people.
Yeah.
And what spurred from it now is amazing. Like you'd mentioned Colin and Marty at Meeting House.
Yeah.
They're doing great things. I've got a brewer that worked for me that's down at the Vale.
Yeah.
Mike over at Tonewood. I believe he's the head brewer over there. Jesse at Industrial Arts. Ryan, who owns Freak Folk up in Vermont.
Yeah.
I mean, I can keep going on and on and on and on and on and on and on, but it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very
Could you
cool.
have thought, like, did you think just down the line, you're like, everybody here is going to be something? It's just like you could tell when you're in
Was it like
that,
focus,
you know?
or was it like a lot of like individual, like everybody kind of had their own ideas?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was focused. It was kind of the Wild West. I mean, nobody had really
Yeah.
been doing what we were doing. Treehouse and Trillium were on the rise at the same time that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Hill Farmstead obviously was on the rise. Like,
Yeah.
from a regional perspective. So like, I don't know. It was like the Wild West. Like we had no idea. And I was a kid. I was 25 years old when I was
Wow,
running.
that's crazy.
When I was running Tire Dams. Yeah, I was a kid. I had no idea. And I didn't know any better. You know,
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm going to make the best fucking beer I can make. I'm going to do it. I'm going to grow this. Like,
Yeah.
like I said it earlier, I was just hungry. And I am hungry. Like
Yeah, definitely.
I was just really, really hungry to win.
Yeah. So this from there, then eventually 2 years, you were just like,
Yeah,
this is-
I burnt out. It was
Okay.
it just had gotten to be too much for me. Decided to move on from there. I started the consulting company from there. I started working with basically business plan to first month of operation was kind of like my business model.
And how did you get into that? Just because you had seen the growth of all these people, so like you had seen from the inside, like what they were talking about, like money wise, and kind of how you build out, like this is the budgets that you need.
Yeah.
These are the steps you need to take.
Yeah, I had seen breweries that worked and I'd seen breweries that didn't work, and I'd been a part of a few pretty successful operations at that point and figured that knowledge was valuable to
Yeah.
somebody. So I sort of just printed some T-shirts and put a listing on Brewer, and that was that. And almost immediately, I had 10 clients. So I built.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, I built a ton of breweries in this area. Tannery Run and Ambler. What's the cidery on South and 7th? Hale and True. I worked with Neck of the Woods out in Jersey. New Trail was one of my clients. I don't know if you've heard of the New Trail company. And Attic. Before Bogdan ended up at Attic, I was working with Laura and Todd, helping
Cool.
them size out their system, get everything set up.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're doing that, and now, like you said, New Trail comes calling, and now you're driving up to
Williamsport. Yeah. New Trail was my second client.
Okay.
I, had a little bit of a horseshoe up my ass on that one. But these guys, Dave and Charles, reached out to me. They were pretty successful restaurateurs at the time.
In State College, right?
Where
that
State
area?
College, Williamsport area.
Okay.
They'd owned some nightclubs. They'd had everything from like fine dining restaurants out in Erie to like gastropub. But at the time when I started working with those guys, they had a craft beer burger bar, and then they had a wood-fired pizza, kind of like fast casual Italian joint that had a stellar wine list.
And that was not New Trail? Like, New Trail was like a new brand that then they created?
No, they reached out to me about Williamsport Brewing Company is
Okay.
what the initial email
Okay.
was. And they said, like, hey, we saw your listing. We're starting this brewery up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Are you interested in coming up and chatting with us? I'm like,
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Well, I can drive up to Williamsport and chat with you about what your project's about and kind of figure out whether or not we're a fit. And, we worked great together.
Do you think from the beginning, did you see something that was different? Like, was it the model that they were like, because your guys' model is just like, I guess what I see is you guys are in Williamsport, it's cheap production property, and then it's obviously like, you know how to brew great beer, but you guys like have this distribution model that's insane. Was that the plan from the beginning?
No, I mean, it was pretty modest goals from the
Okay.
beginning. I mean, we thought, that it's 2017 or 2018 that I'm talking about. We
Yeah.
had thought that we were going to be about 5,000 barrels in the first 5 years. Like,
Selling in Williamsport, or was the plan to sell a lot of it in Philly?
we kept saying the local market. We
Okay.
didn't really understand. We didn't know what the local market meant to us, but it was kind of like Lycoming County, the county that Williamsport's in,
Yeah.
and the surrounding like 10-ish counties that we
Okay.
thought was going to be the initial shot, and it was, for the first 6 months.
Were there a lot of breweries even around you at the time? Because State College, when I went to Penn State 2011 and 2015, there was only 3 breweries there, and even like the surrounding areas, there wasn't. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there, but there's not a lot of breweries out there.
Yeah, I
Were you
mean,
guys
in
like
State College, it would have been like Otto's.
it was Happy Valley Brewing Company.
Happy
at that
Valley
time.
Brewing Company had a brewery, or has a brewery, and then I don't know who the third is that you're thinking of, but You know,
There was one in Bellefonte, and I don't know. Maybe they were just a brew pub or something.
Oh, I don't. It's escaping me then.
Well, that's the thing. Like you never even heard. I remember though. There was one in Bellefonte, but
yeah. So I mean, Williamsport's a solid hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Were there any breweries in Williamsport?
Yeah, Bullfrog. Bullfrog's from.
Is from. So they've been around for a while, right?
20. I think they're 28 or 29 years at this point. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, old school, like OG craft run for Bullfrog. And then there's a couple others in town at the time. Ripstein's, and who else was before us in town? I'm drawing a blank on it. But either way, there's now like 7 or 8 breweries in Williamsport. It's, Bullfrog, Ripstein's is around. There's Roscoe's, John Ryan, Therapy, which is a solid 20-minute ride. Baldbirds from down here has a brewery in Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, which is a confusing conundrum. There's a handful. There's certainly a handful now in Williamsport, but that's all from the craft beer rise.
Cool. So at what point did it go from like consulting to like, I'm now a part of this?
Charles, my business partner, then client, fell down a flight of stairs as we were getting our equipment in, like maybe a week or a month before we got all of our equipment in. And he broke both of his heels. And I remember thinking...
Broken heels?
Yeah, I remember thinking in that moment, like, oh shit, like I'm supposed to be out of here after I produce like the first batches of beer.
Sorry, he just had to reset the camera.
That's all good. I got to be out of here like a month after we produced these first batches of beer. Like I've got other clients lined up. Like, but I feel bad for these guys. I really like them. Like they're doing something cool. Like, I'll stick around a little while longer. And here I am now, 7 years later.
Wow.
It was pretty early on. It was within the first 2 months of like actually selling beer that they offered me equity, and I decided to stay on board.
And when did it go from Williamsport Brewing Company to New Trail?
Oh, pretty early. That was one of the first things I think I changed.
Before you even started selling beer?
Yeah, long before we started selling beer. Long before we even bought equipment. I was like, this
and the logo and everything?
Yeah, that was
the original logo?
It is the original logo. We reached out to a guy by the name of Ryan Keats. He owns Fox Duck in Lancaster, which is a design company that does like T-shirts. They're near the market down there. He and my other business partner, Dave, were college roommates.
Oh, nice.
And small world. He does great work. And he did our original round of graphic design, and everything sort of spurred from there.
Cool.
Yeah, and like the branding's authentic. Like if you've never been to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, it's beautiful. It's rolling Pennsylvania. I'm going to put it in air quotes.
Yeah.
Mountains, they're hills to anybody else, but they're mountains in Pennsylvania. There's creeks. You can go whitewater kayaking. You can fly fish. You can just take a beer kayak, a beer float, as you might call it.
Yeah.
You can hike. You can do everything up there. And my business partners and myself are outdoorsmen. I grew up, I'm an Eagle Scout. I was camping every week, or not every week, but every month.
Yeah.
I ski actively. I snowboard. I kayak. I do all those things my business partners
You fit into the culture there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
So you guys started New Trail, and then like you said you had these like kind of like humble projections as far as like how much you guys were going to grow.
Yeah.
But did you kind of come in and be like, listen, I know these distributors in Philly, and we can kind of like, I think you were like kind of like the Steph Curry of craft beer. I mean, like, people consider you like a Philadelphia craft brewer. You sell so much beer in Philadelphia.
We do sell a lot of beer in Philadelphia, but the original business model for New Trail was pretty like 90s by design. It was like we were going to have a Pilsner, a Belgian style white ale, an amber ale, an American IPA or West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
They were like, well, yeah, you can brew like a hazy IPA once a month.
Yeah. Did you change that immediately?
So when we opened the brewery, I opened with Broken Heels.
Cool.
Because it was kind of like a fuck you to my business partner.
Yeah.
Because he broke both of his heels, right as we're opening the brewery. And there's pictures. I have them somewhere.
I always thought Broken Heels was like a call to skiing or something.
So it sort of works both ways.
Yeah.
Like, because it's about being outside and like breaking your heels while you're hiking or skiing or doing whatever you're doing. But that idiot fell down a flight of stairs and broke both of his heels, and he. I have pictures of him as we are like craning in the tanks in a wheelchair. Like he's like rolling around.
One leg is tough. 2 legs is
Broke
insane.
both of his heels. And he's a big dude.
I'm sure
He's like
very comical.
6'5".
Wow.
He's a big dude.
It,
He's
it
in a
gives
wheelchair.
It gives me the Vince McMahon like entering the ring, tearing both his quads.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
A little bit like that, but he's under the tanks. Like they're up on a crane with like, you've stood up tanks before, I'm assuming. So you're like screwing in these like all thread screws, and he's like sitting there, like just kind of like going like this, like under the tank in his wheelchair.
Funny.
And he's like telling me how to rig a
get
tank. I'm
pictures
like,
of that.
shut up! I've rigged more tanks than you've seen in your life.
Just face him towards the
Yeah,
wall.
I know. I honestly, I wish, hindsight being 2020, I would have just rolled him down the street and let him go into traffic. I love him. I'm just being funny.
So I honestly have not been to New Trail. You guys, was the plan to have a tap room, or like what is the tap room situation?
We
you
have a
guys
tap room. We've had a tap room since day one.
Okay.
It's pretty large. We have about 4,000 square feet inside for a tap room space and a pretty
Cool.
large outdoor space. But it is Williamsport, so we see a lot of transient traffic. People are going to their cabin on Pine Creek or going up to the Finger Lakes or whatever. We're right off of 15 and 80.
Williamsport is Little League World Series, right?
It sure is.
So do you guys just crush during the Little League World
We
Series?
sure don't.
No?
No, Little League isn't great for the brewery. I mean, like,
I could see,
for
like-
distro, it's fine. Like, we
Okay,
sell a fair
really?
amount of beer downtown, but like, we're just too far. We're about a mile outside of the city limits.
Yeah.
And people, when they go to the Little League World Series,
I know
and-
there's kids, but I feel like all of the
Yeah.
kids bring their parents.
Yeah. There are people downtown drinking at the bars and at the restaurants or whatever, but the brewery doesn't seem to benefit directly
it.
from that. We do find every once in a while a team from wherever
Yeah.
happens to find us and makes it kind of home base, but it's a fun time of year to be there.
I'm sure I heard his party.
It's
like
madness.
that and Puxatawny Phil are like the 2 biggest parties.
It's more Mardi Gras, actually. Mardi Gras is
Really?
big. Yeah. I don't know where that came from, but Mardi Gras is a pretty big party in Williamsport.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess at what point? I mean, you said you kind of put your foot down. Like, no, we're brewing these hazy IPAs.
Oh yeah. I was in that part of the story. Yeah, so we were gonna brew this one-off beer called Broken Heels, and maybe we'd bring it back once a month. And it was like, oh shit, no, it's selling a lot. Maybe we'll do it like twice a month. And then it was like, oh, maybe we can do like, it was a 15-barrel system. They're like, oh, we should maybe do 30 barrels of it, like maybe every other week. It just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And I was like, hey, there's something else we can do. And they're like, well, what? And I was like, we can release a new beer every week. It just needs a new label. We'll design a new beer, new grist, new hops, new everything. And people are going to, like at Tired Hands, they used to line up out the doors for this. And I don't expect that to happen in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, but like we could give this to everybody, to the public. It could be available at Wegmans. It could be, at your local bottle shop.
I'll be honest. I didn't steal your idea, but I when I was thinking about like my business model, I looked at the way like line culture, but wholesale distribution and I really liked it. I think it makes a lot of sense.
That was 100% the idea. This is, early 2018 at this point. So line culture was still really a big thing back then. I was like, and we can, not price gouge for people, and we can make really good beer that's affordable and make sure that everybody can have it.
Like customers, they like the line culture. They're like, no, this you can only get this here, and maybe you showed people like, no, you can get this at your grocery store, and it's the same quality.
Sure.
Maybe it was like eye opening to a lot of people that were like doing the line culture.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I wasn't a line culture guy, so like while I was a part of creating the line culture, I wasn't a guy that was standing in line for beer because
I think if you're creating like not on the
I understand the appeal to it. I understood the appeal at that time for it. I had done trips to Vermont to go get Heady Topper, and I'd been to Hill Farmstead. And before working at Tired Hands, I'd waited in line for something at the cafe. It would have been Farm Hands or something like that.
Yeah. But was that really where it kind of took off when you started making these one-off beers?
Exactly. That was really what started the initial growth pattern for the brewery, was the one-off.
And
beers.
how soon into you guys being open did that happen? About a year?
We started producing in January of 2018, and it was by August, I think we had started moving towards that model. And it was just like snap overnight. And
you guys were already signed to some of these wholesalers?
We had started with the original wholesaler in Williamsport that was doing the local quote-unquote market for Lycoming and the surrounding counties. And then I want to say Erie was our next move. And then from Erie, it was Philadelphia. So we kind of had like a stretch across the state with huge gaps in between.
But just staying in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it was 100% Pennsylvania for a long time. Yeah, we did 30,000 barrels before we left the state of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We wanted to go 2 miles deep before we left the state.
Yeah.
Where are you at right now?
We're 5 states. So it's Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, West Virginia, and Delaware.
Wow.
Delaware is the most recent addition this year.
So is New York just a weird market, or why not New York?
Like we talk about New York all the time. I mean, it's expensive to open a market. At this point, as we've grown and grown and grown, we've learned more and more and more. It costs a rep. It costs hotel rooms. It costs signage and pint glasses and coasters and all the shit that you need to open a market.
Yeah. So I guess you had worked at some of these very fast growing breweries. But I guess what you guys are doing now is like on a much larger scale. Is it kind of a different game? I mean, like the culture at Tired Hands is much different than what you're doing now. Like you guys were, like you said, most of the beer was just sold over the bar. Yeah. And now you guys are just, I mean, you're everywhere. Yeah,
I mean, culture is going to be different anywhere, but I don't know, the idea behind it all is just making great beer, right? So like from making 10,000 barrels to 50,000 barrels, there's certainly a lot of hurdles you have to cross.
Like, have you guys have a larger brewing system now?
Of course, yeah. So we started on a 2-vessel 15-barrel brew house. That changed to a 3-vessel 15 within the first year and a half, maybe 2 years of the operation. Today we operate a 4-vessel 60 and the 3-vessel 15.
Cool.
So.
And it's all in the same area?
Yeah, it's 100% in the same warehouse.
Cool.
Yeah. So we went from having 8,000 square feet to 70,000 square feet, 3 employees to 50.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a lot of is the direction. I mean, you're obviously brewing the beer, but the direction as far as like you guys have Crisp and Crisp Lime and like all these other things. Is that coming from you?
Yeah.
Kind of putting out these new beers, like, listen, we can make this, or it's just kind of like seeing what the market is doing and kind of...
It's a bit of both. I mean, I'm not going to take 100% credit for all of our innovations. Like Crisp Amber, which is what I'm drinking right now, won gold medal today at Best Craft Beer Awards. But like, it started with Crisp, and I've wanted to make Crisp since day one. I've wanted to make Crisp when I worked back at Rock Bottom.
It's great. Which one is? Would you say Crisp or Broken Heels is kind of like your number one beer?
Oh, Broken Heels by far.
Okay.
Not even close.
Okay.
Yeah. Broken Heels is absolutely our number one.
Okay.
Beer. Yeah, I mean we're producing somewhere between 320 and 480 barrels a week. Of
oh wow.
Heels. Yeah,
right.
it's like not even close.
All right.
And like it's about 100. It's about 120, maybe close to 200.
Maybe it's just I'm just seeing Crisp way more. I'm like used to seeing Broken Heels. Like I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I don't know, but like Crisp, it's all about brand families, right? So Broken Heels has Broken Heels, it has Double Broken Heels, it has Tropical Double Broken Heels, and then Crisp has Crisp Lime, Crisp Amber. Like I don't know. So I guess back to your question about where is the inspiration coming from? Like we're data driven. Like we want to look at what the market's responding to. We want to see what people are purchasing elsewhere. I want to make beer that everybody wants to drink.
Yeah.
I don't want to put beer on a shelf that nobody's going to drink. So it's what I got what I want to do.
I mean, I think you guys are really reactive. I think there's a lot of breweries that they're just kind of they make great beer, but they don't react very quickly. Like you guys, I mean, like you said, you started off these hazy IPAs, and now like kind of session beers are coming back. You have now 24/7 coming out.
Yeah, 24/7 for sure.
You started kind of leaning into Crisp and these other lagers that are like getting more popular now. I think you guys are like, you're able to, even with you guys growing really quickly, you're able to shift kind of your focus really easily.
Yeah, I mean, we work really hard to do that. My business partners and I talk constantly. I talk to my one business partner at 8:00 almost every evening, just like what happened, what's going on, And we used to talk about like driving a freighter or captaining a freighter, right? Like we wanted to be able to take something that was going fucking due north and be able to turn it south the next day.
Yeah.
And that only happens with making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. So, like, the team that you built, did you bring? I mean, you've worked at a lot of places. Were you bringing a lot of people that you knew, or?
No, it's almost all homegrown as far as my production staff is
Yeah.
concerned. My marketing manager is a guy I went to college with. He was originally a sales guy for us, and he sort of fell into the role, and he's doing a pretty good job at it. And then our sales team, we have a really solid sales team. We pulled in people from.
Shout out Aaron Denninger.
Yeah, Aaron's okay. No. And my local team is to Philadelphia is really great. Aaron and Steve do a really nice job. But both of them are like Bella Vista veterans from way back when. The management team is coming from all different walks of life in craft beer.
Yeah.
John Hoey, the sales manager, was started on the Trogs bottling line 15 years ago.
Nice.
You know, grew his way up through Trogs, went and worked for Wilsbach, which is the wholesaler, the bud wholesaler in the Harrisburg region. Brooke, one of my guys in Maryland, one of my managers in Maryland, he ran Dewclaw at one point. We just attracted really, really solid people. And
from a bunch of different places, so it's like a bunch of different minds.
Adam Fowler, if anybody knows Adam Fowler, comes from a bunch of different breweries down here. I think most recently it would have been Saucony Creek.
Cool.
We just wanted to attract really good talent.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting. Like, you guys are in Williamsport. When I think of like people that are into becoming brewers, I think like city people. Is it
Okay.
like are you getting people from all around? They're moving to Williamsport, or is it a lot of like kind of Williamsport people?
It's a bit of both. I have 10 people on the hot side, cold side team, which is like hot side and cellar as well.
Yeah.
We just call it the hot side team.
Yeah.
Some of them are homegrown. Some of them are local to the Williamsport region. My production manager is an old Iron Hill brewer, Mark Campolongo. He was at Chestnut Hill, I want to say, for a little while. I have my cellar manager is an old distiller from like Utah or Montana. I forget which state.
These are also random.
Yeah, his wife ended up moving to State College for Penn State to work as like a student activities person.
Yeah.
And he like shot me a resume. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, you can have a job.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you used to make whiskey? Absolutely. You can definitely make beer.
Is that something that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, loosely. It's the growth has been really good for New Trail, so thinking about liquor is hard.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I really want to do it.
But to like take your focus away from brewing.
We have lightning in a bottle. I mean, we know it, and I'm trying to be modest about it, but it is,
fastest growing brewery in the country, you said. It's like
I'm trying to be modest about it, but yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of success, and I'm humbled to have it. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and is it mostly? I mean, you guys are in these other states. Are you guys just kind of dominating Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania is by and large our largest market.
Is it catching on in other states?
It's
is
starting
it like
to.
Kind of the same way?
Yeah, it's starting to. I mean, some states are better than other states, but
Yeah.
you think about a state that was pre-COVID, pre-everything. I was very familiar with how Pennsylvania worked, and what Pennsylvania wanted. Like, of course, we're strong in Pennsylvania.
Are there different styles that are hitting other markets stronger than you would have thought?
Yeah, I think we see like Crisp seems to do pretty well in Maryland, which I'm surprised to see. I would have thought like Natty Bo would have had a stronger hold down there.
Natty Bo's out of like South Carolina.
Well, yeah, but I mean Natty,
but they're obsessed with it.
Obsessed with it.
Yeah, I think it's the only market, but it's not brewed there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but it was brewed there at one point, if I remember correctly. I don't know. Like I certainly. Some markets do better with Broken Heels as compared to like our one-off series. Like, and it's funny even within the state. Like we talk about Pennsylvania, but like the regions in Pennsylvania have different buying habits too.
Definitely. I think the Pittsburgh like distribution model is like completely different than the Philadelphia distribution model. So what we've been told.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has a fourth tier primarily,
where it's just like the middle.
So the wholesaler would take it to your local D down the street, and that D would take it to your bar, and that's the difference. So there's just an extra $5-10 on every keg that goes down the line.
Yeah.
How is like just learning all the new markets? Like
Exhausting.
Yeah.
Before I started New Trail, I didn't have gray hair. Not that I have a ton of gray hair, but I'm exhausted.
And it like. Obviously, you're brewing the beer, but like, are you the marketing and kind of like the business strategy of like you guys just like pushing beer into these places. And like the crisp is so much cheaper than everybody else. The like you said, like putting like the drop shipping where like you're putting new beers out in new places all the time. Is that just coming from your experience, or like I don't know, you guys are just putting it's like a different angle than everyone. Like you guys are, like you said, a 90s beer model.
Well, so it started as a 90s beer model, and it very quickly shifted into at the time the modern model to just like have one-off beers. We just decided to amplify that model.
Do you think like you focusing on growing and becoming a regional brewery? I think that like you're zigging when everyone else is zagging. Like everyone else is trying to get small, and you guys are trying to get big. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
no,
100%
100% it makes sense. We know that what the growth that we have is a once in a generation growth. Like it's going to be hard for anybody to get to where we are.
It's like one out of like 200 breweries can go from a small brewery to
there's 10,000 breweries in the country, right?
And 90% of them make less than 1,000 barrels.
Exactly. So the top 150 craft breweries in the country, I think number 150 makes about, is it 10,000 barrels? I don't even think it's that much. I think it's like 5,000 barrels. So like we know in 2024,
you guys probably grew by that much, or probably like 2 or 3 times that much.
No, we're having 100% growth year over year over year. But as we've gotten larger and larger and larger, that's harder and harder and harder.
Definitely,
so like we're maybe like at a 20-ish% growth.
Okay.
But like I'm anticipating last year in 2020. How's that data work? We're 2025 right now. So in 2023, the Brewers Association released that we were like the 62nd or 63rd largest craft brewery in the country.
When do those stats come out?
In May. It comes in the April.
So it's
May.
coming soon. Are you guys like
I'm
waiting?
looking for it. I'm hoping for like 55. I think we'll be about the 55th largest brewery in the country. So
you guys are growing, and there's a lot of people that are shrinking. So like between both of those things happening, I think you guys are going to shoot.
I think there's an outside shot to make the top 50 this year. And I'm not saying that we're going to do it, but I think there's an outside shot that we make.
That's cool.
We make the top 50. So yeah, it's wild. I know,
right?
like people come to the brewery all the time and visit from out of town friends or industry friends that I have, and they walk through and I'm giving them the tour, and I get asked this question all the time. They're like, "Did you ever think you'd be here?" And I'm like, "I don't know where I am tomorrow." Like like I just never really thought like they're like, aren't you like so proud of yourself? Aren't you so proud of what you did? I'm like, I am. But like I'm not even. I'm so focused on today. I'm so focused on tomorrow. Like I'll have people come in that visited in the early days, 6-7 years ago, and I'll ask them like, well, where was the canning line the last time that you came through the brewery? Because that can give me an indication in time as to where what was where. Like because it just has changed so much, and the industry changes so much all the time.
How through New Trail, like, have you just seen changes that you weren't expecting as well? I mean, obviously the industry's changing, but with your growth too, and to see these different changes as well, like generationally, like I feel like you guys have been hitting it really well with, I don't know, just like the Kenwoods, the garage beer, like that too, like in its own sector, you kind of have something that works there, but also with craft.
I decided a long time ago I didn't want to be the guy that missed hazy IPA. Mm-hmm. Like I think about all the guys that were like old heads that were like, I'm never making a hazy beer, I'm never making a hazy IPA. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy to somebody else. Yep. I don't want to like tell somebody someday that smoothie beer is not going to work or whatever. Like I just want to make beer that people want to drink. Mm-hmm. And whatever that beer is, like I'm passionate about that.
Yeah.
Are you looking at other people, what they're doing? Like, how do you get a read on like the industry? You're purely looking at data, or are there different people that you're looking at?
There's data. I talk to my sales reps. The
data comes back, but the data, when you get data, then it's old data. And you guys are kind of ahead of all the curves,
we get pretty consistent data. We see data every like 13 weeks or something like that. So like we'll see if there's an emerging trend or what that way.
Chop something.
But at the same time, like I'm also talking to guys like you. I'm talking to I was just a human robot before I came here. I'm talking to Andrew. Like what's going on, what's working for you. Obviously they're selling a shit ton of lager, but like what's working, what's not working, and then I'm doing that in every market that I go to, every person that I talk to.
Let's shift focus for a second. You're just a Human Robot. Human Robot just put out with North Park the West Coast Pills. We were talking before you came on here.
Yeah.
You guys just put on or just did a collaboration with
Beer Hall and Beer Mill.
Beer Hall and Beer Mill.
Mm-hmm.
The
Beer.
West Coast Pills.
Yeah.
Beer.
Yeah.
So what do you think a West Coast Pilsner
I
is?
hate you because I don't have an answer. We were talking about it. No, I think that like in the same sort of way that we were talking about what East Coast IPA and what hazy IPA versus New England IPA is, I think that there might be an emerging trend right now in what is hoppy lager.
Yeah.
What is going to be, and I'm not naming names or saying what is and what isn't, but the consumer seems to be reacting to the term West Coast Pilsner. But to me, I think West Coast Pilsner, cold IPA, and IPL are very, very similar. In the same way that New England IPA and hazy IPA are similar.
Yeah, it's like a beer is a beer. The style doesn't mean anything. It's just
you had asked me earlier when I was talking about when we were outside, and you were asking me like what's the difference between hazy IPA, New England IPA, and where does lactose fit into this? And I said lactose fits into milkshake IPA, and I think that same thing might be happening at a much, much smaller scale in hoppy lager. Like to me, when I think about East Coast IPA or New England or hazy IPA, like without a style guideline, I would call it hoppy blonde ale. So I'm going to call West Coast Pills, cold IPA, and IPL hoppy lager, hoppy pale lager.
It's almost like you guys are all kind of brewing. Everyone's kind of brewing the same general style, but you need to kind of get the feel from the consumer, like what do they feel comfortable buying,
and whether or not it's going to stick around too. I mean, we all remember 5 years ago when brewed IPA had its 15 minutes. So we need to make sure that this isn't brewed IPA. And I loved brewed IPA.
I hated it. It's not brewed IPA.
Yeah, I didn't mind it.
But I guess are there other styles that you think that are kind of like emerging? Are there different trends that you're seeing?
I think West Coast is on the rise as general, which is I think why the word West Coast Pilsner is working. So we have Trail Marker on the table, which is our most recent flagship beer.
Yeah.
West Coast IPA, Simcoe, Amarillo, Centennial, and Columbus.
There's a lot of old school hops.
They sure are. And I select for old school Simcoe. I want Cat Piss Simcoe.
I just put I just released a Comet, single hop Comet. My thought process is these hops have been around for 30 years. We've been perfecting them for 30 years. Just because they're not cool anymore, they're still planting them.
I love Crystal. I think Crystal is a really cool hop.
Yes.
That way, because it was that.
Yeah, and they perfected it, and it's no one's using it, but you're paying probably 4 times as much money for these sexy hops. But you can get high quality hops that are a fraction of the price, and then you can use more hops in the beer.
Yeah,
you can use better blends.
It's not too dissimilar to my approach. When I first started selecting for New Trail, Simcoe, which I was just talking about, there's 2 really different styles of Simcoe. There's new age and old school Simcoe. Simcoe can be really tropical, pineapple, passion fruit with a little bit of citrus, or it can be old school, fucking dank cat piss citrus.
Michigan Simcoe tastes fruity. Isn't there some Michigan
It's
version
more late harvest and early harvest.
Okay.
And YCH is going to fucking kill me for not remembering which one's which. I want to say that early harvest is more like that cat piss dank Simcoe, and the late harvest is more fruity. But either way, the first year that I sat down for selection, I was selecting for Simcoe, and they gave me all sorts of this citrus, pineapple, really beautiful hop Simcoe, and I'm like, yeah, it smells good. This smells good. This smells good. And I'm like, this isn't Simcoe. Bring the cat piss. And they're like, what? I'm sorry. We thought you were a new school hazy IPA brewer. I was like, I am. But Simcoe is a tool.
Yeah.
And Simcoe balances all of those flavors out. I can get that from Citra. I can get that from Mosaic. I can get that from Talus or Sabro or whatever hop was really tropical at the time. I wanted to be able to balance it with dank.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people just look at the names and no, we want the cool hops. But they don't actually look at it pragmatically.
No, it's a tool. I think of hops I'll talk about Columbus. I use Columbus salt. It's just a little bit, a little sprinkle.
A flavor enhancer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess you said you're going to hop selection. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
Sure.
how many hops you're selecting? It's a lot.
Yeah, we select for like 13 or 14 different hops. I'll select for New Zealand hops at the Craft Brewers Conference in Indiana this year.
Yeah.
So I'll select for like Nelson, Motueka, Nectaron. And that's pretty cool. Last year I got to select with a woman that her name's escaping me, but she owns like 15 brew pubs in New Zealand. She was like one of the first person to ever use Nelson Sauvin.
Wow.
Yeah, she was super fun to talk about. So she helped me select my Nelson this year, which is really good. But no, out in Yakima, I'm selecting for like Citra, Mosaic, Equinaut, Cascade, Centennial, Crystal, Sabro, Talus, and everything's different. And I was talking about like tools, and I think about every hop differently and how that tool is going to work in our war chest.
Yeah, it's like very chef-like.
Yeah, so ultimately, obviously, it falls on me to make the decision on what hop that we're going to bring. But I generally like to bring somebody with me that has never selected hops before. So I generally like to pull somebody out of the production team. Last year, I brought one of my packaging guys. And he's like, Mike, I don't know that I can help you make the decision. I was like, no, you have a virgin mind. You have no idea. You're gonna rub these things, and I'm gonna tell you that I want you to find clementine, and you're gonna tell me which hop has the most clementine. And he's like, oh, okay.
It's
I can do that.
A coach would rather take somebody that like has no training,
Has no
opposed to,
training at
like,
all.
A lot of training, the wrong training.
Exactly, because I might have a preconceived notion, and ultimately, like I said, it's my decision to make the hop selection. But like I want somebody else to tell me like, no, I think that blindly, because I don't tell anybody while I'm standing there at the table.
Because the customers, they don't know.
They
it's
don't
like
know,
they like you need to go to their level and kind of see where they're at.
Yeah, 100%.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so like, and I always tell anybody's welcome to join me at hop selection. You know, pay your way to Yakima and come rub hops with me. I don't care. Like,
What's the selection process like? Is it a week or?
For me, I can do it in a few hours. I can do about 13 to 14 hops in a few hours. And
do you get like sensory overload? Do you have to like, kind of break it up?
It's sensory. I try to put them in the order in which I think they're important, with breaks in between, and make sure that I'm not doing like 2 back-to-back citrus or 2 back-to-back tropical or whatever. So you're kind of moving from citrus to pine to tropical, back to citrus to move further and further down the line.
Yeah. Are you using any like advanced hop products? At some point, raw material providers decided that they want to be craft breweries too, and everybody decided that they were going to market their raw materials differently.
Sure.
And I'm seeing it a lot in the hop industry right now. Like,
the hop industry has been doing it for a long time.
Then they went into the cryo, and they had like fancy packaging with the cryo.
Do you know what was before cryo?
What was that?
T45 is what cryo is. So
yeah,
it was basically the same thing. It's just a better name.
Yeah.
But we buy T90s, which is the standard pellet size. It has to do with the pellet size and the amount of hop or plant material that's in it. But cryo became more based off of like the hop keef, the lupulin powder.
Yeah.
And then there's now more extract-based stuff. And the early extract-based stuff wasn't necessarily great. It was more bittering focus. And now there seem to be more aroma-based.
There's some that are, I think, now that people are swinging towards lagers, there's like these advanced hop products that like add head retention. Yeah. And I think that a lot of lager breweries are going to start like kind of using these.
Yeah, I mean those products exist in most food industries, like any beverage industry.
But what I'm saying is like they've been calling them like this is like tea something, like some scientific name. I think that they're going to start giving it a name
100%.
and start like.
Are you asking me about abstracts? Is that what you're trying to get to, or are you?
Kind of. I'm like, are you guys using any of these like advanced like oils and stuff?
Yeah. So I had piloted a lot of that early oils and extracts. Yeah. Tired hands, and I didn't love the products that we were making with them. And I'm not going to say from which company.
Or they just too expensive. Like you weren't seeing any effort, or like it just like you weren't seeing any difference, or it just.
I thought T90s made a better product, and and I do truly think that T90 like hot pellets make really really great beer.
You need some vegetable matter. Are you saying the balance?
The balance. I'm 100% about balance, but we are using abstracts. I am sending some of my hops to be. They call it tolled, which is where they juice the hop pellet basically. We used to juice for alpha for CO2 bittering, and now we're juicing for aroma, and it's a good product. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess with that being said, I mean, you guys have a lot of new stuff coming out. Like you have Trail Marker, you have I mean, you guys come out with a product, I think, like every single month. But like, what are the things that like you guys you think kind of in the next year?
Yeah, so for us, like obviously we do a lot of one-off stuff.
Yeah.
You know, then that sometimes helps me pilot some processes or products like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But for our big bets this year, Trail Marker, our West Coast IPA that I was talking about earlier, is a pretty big bet for us. It comes in a 12-pack, 16-ounce 4-pack.
Yeah.
And as well as draft. And then 24/7, which we were all drinking at some point.
Yeah, it's
during
really
the podcast.
good.
Yeah,
It's
thank
delicious.
you. I appreciate it. That's a 4.72. See what I did there? 24/7, 4.72. No, it's a hazy session IPA, and that is being released to our wholesalers, I think, next Monday. So it should hit shelves the next 2 weeks, and I'm sure nobody knows what today is. So we're probably talking about the end of March to see that.
It'll probably be like right when you guys release.
Is it really? Oh, cool.
Yeah, timing wise, yeah.
Oh, perfect. I did pretty well on that then. No, 24/7 is super cool. I'm very excited about it. You know, when I have beers, I want to have a few, and I love my Broken Heels and I love my double Broken Heels. But
I think
some nights I want to have more than a couple of them.
I think sometimes when people make these session IPAs that are much lower ABV, the thought process of the brewer is like, I need to figure out how to get as much aroma in near as possible. But it has some bitterness to it. It does taste like a complete beer.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people are missing that, where they just think like, how do I just reduce the bitterness because I don't want to overpower it with this like low ABV beer.
All about balance.
Yeah.
And it goes back to a conversation that we were having before about hazy IPA versus New England IPA.
Yeah.
And while I love both styles, I think they are distinctly different. And that hazy IPA has bitterness and has balance, whereas New England IPA is sort of like a it's like a caricature of IPA.
Yeah.
And it's cool. I like New England IPA, but I prefer to drink something that has balance.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool talking to you. It's like a lot of the stuff that you're saying. Sometimes like, you know, you talk to people in the industry and like, I don't know where you're coming from here, but like, I agree with everything. That you're saying.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything?
No, this is an awesome conversation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was
a
great.
blast.
Are we done? I have no idea. Are we?
I think so.
We're wrapping up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess this is what I want to talk about. So, I mean, we talked about a lot of your beers. A lot of people that come on, like, they talk about, like, events or something. Like, do you have... I mean, you guys are in Williamsport. Like, do you guys push
Yeah,
events?
we do pretty big events. Like, well, our seventh orbit party is going to be April 26th. We'll do live music and a bunch of releases. Like, I have a collab coming out with Dancing Gnome, with Old Thunder in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you know those guys. And then Meeting House. Meeting House, we're doing a Tetnang Pills.
Nice.
As well as our seventh orbit, which is a hazy triple IPA. But there'll be live music, 5-6 food trucks. It'll be a lot of fun.
Nice. Do you guys have... I guess it's just food trucks that you're
Just
tapping?
food trucks, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any more questions.
Yeah, I mean, we just follow us on the socials, and you'll
Yeah.
see what's happening at the brewery. You know,
Yes.
there's an event every month.
Follow you guys, and also just go to anywhere beer is sold. And
Oh no! Stop! Not that big.
No, it is very cool. You know, it's in an age where a lot of people are negative about craft beer because they say it's dying or whatever. It's like you guys are kind of proving like, listen, no, it's not. Like, stop yelling at clouds and come down here to the real world.
No, I mean, I'm not gonna. I think there's again back to balance. I think that there's some sort of balance that has to happen right now. We definitely opened too many breweries in America, and they're closing, and I'm sad to hear that because I love beer and I love small business owners and I love the economy that builds.
Yeah.
But like, if the market's not going to bear it, the market's not going to bear it. So we just happen to be fortunate to be growing right now. So
Nice. Yeah, I'm happy that you guys are going to just more good beer. I think more good beer that's available in the market is always good for craft beer.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it makes sense. Cool.
Sweet.
Cool. Follow us at Brewdat, at the Brewdat Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you guys next week.
cheers, guys.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, you.